Are you tired of feeling like you're just photocopying your portraits rather than expressing your unique vision? If the grid method is leaving you dissatisfied and you struggle with proportions, then this video is for you. I'm going to break down a step-by-step to help you break free from those frustrations, master those proportions so you can start creating portraits that reflect your voice. By the way, I'm Adam. I've been drawing for over 25 years and now I help aspiring charcoal artists come off the grid method so they feel connected to their work, master proportions so they can take on those commissions with confidence and develop their style so they have their own unique voice. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out any time we post a video about freehand drawing and expressive realism. Let's dive in. So before we jump into the drawing, let's actually have a look at the reference first. By just having a basic understanding of what the reference is showing us is going to help us so much when we actually come to doing the drawing. We can also then start to identify little nuances within the shot that we can start to exaggerate and imply into the drawing as well. Now, the very first thing that I see that I really like is the value structure that falls all the way through it. It has such a nice contrast between the background, her skin tone, and the highlights. Everything is just really readable and extremely balanced going all the way through. The actual position of her as well, the way she's posed, the way that the light hits her, for me, it's great. It's everything that I love about drawing is involved in this shot. And this is why I cannot recommend enough that you actually start taking your own reference photos, because you get to create exactly what you want. You don't have to rely on other sources online that everybody else has drawn as well. By taking your own reference shots, you get to build completely 100% original work. Granted, at the beginning, you'll need to start learning about lighting. You'll be surprised at how little you actually really need to know about lighting in order to take a really nice shot. I actually have a free guide that you can download where I go into much more detail about this. I'll leave a link in the description. You can download it. It helped me, so I know it's going to help you. And everything that I use in my workflow still to this day is all included in that free guide. So make sure you download it. Now, because we have this clear separation or this clear readability of the value structure that falls through the entire piece, it sets me up in quite a beneficial way to really then exaggerate certain areas of the portrait. And you'll see during the process where I start to implement those exaggerated areas. In terms of the actual structure, again, we've got really easy shapes and leading lines, which just makes the whole process a lot more digestible, a lot more easier to approach. Obviously, portraits are they're hard in general, but when we have something like this, where we've got really clear lines and shapes coming through, it makes that process that much easier. So if we just break this down into its most simple and basic shapes at the very beginning, it will look something like this. There we go. It doesn't look too complicated there, does it? Like, if we really just break it down into its most simple form, the beginning stages become so much easier. All of that information that the portrait is showing us, let's just get rid of all of that noise and break it down into its most simple form. We have something like that. That is all I'm going for in my beginning stages of the drawing. You can see that this frame, this stencil, doesn't actually look like her. Her likeness isn't in that frame. Her likeness is going to be within the values that we put down. But we need this frame to help us put those values down in a more accurate place. We're not looking for perfection right at the beginning. If you have a look at this frame, let's just zoom in. Like, it's not that accurate in terms of the actual shape of her face. It doesn't even go around the nose properly or around the eye properly. But we don't need that. At the very beginning, if we just pull out, we just want a basic frame to guide us where to put those values down. The values do all the work. Now, the way that she's posing in this photo, we've got her gaze coming this way, we've got the light source coming this way and then her body coming round this way. So we almost have a bit of a S curve that comes through. With the background, I really try to exaggerate that look. I have these big shapes that come around this way, down through this way, and then comes out this way. So I incorporate the composition and the background with the way that she's moving as well. So I start off by finding my widest points, and then I start adding in that basic frame. Now I don't actually add all of it in, as you can see, but I've just done enough around the ear and around the jawline just to help me confirm that I do have my widest points. Now, if you're in a position where you're still not as confident with your proportions, I would recommend putting in more of those shapes because it helps you find your way to your widest point. So it just gives you that confirmation if anything does need to be moved or not. But because I'm relatively confident with what I'm doing with my proportions, I only just do a little bit, and that's where I immediately start to put that background in and start creating that S curve coming through the portrait. Now all of this section here, this is all covered in a shadow. So again, because the values are going to do all of the heavy lifting, it's going to do all of the work, the likeness comes from the values. I need to make sure that I put a base coat, a base value down first before I do anything else with the portrait. When I put those values down, I'll lose that structure, which is absolutely fine. Those initial lines are just there to confirm the placement and the proportions of everything. I can add those structured lines back in after I've got that base value down. So don't worry if you lose some of your work at the beginning, because it's part of that process. Now, because I'm bringing this entire drawing up together, I want the background and the portrait to work in unison. I get it to a point where everything almost has like a mid-tone coming all the way through. So it looks quite flat. As soon as I start adding some darker values in these specific areas, you notice how likeness starts to come through. And then as soon as I add the darker values in the background, all of a sudden the actual piece itself starts to come through. And then it slots us in a position where we're now safe and secure. Everything is there, the likeness is there, the actual style of the drawing is there. And now the only thing that I need to focus on is how I want to be creative with the rest of the drawing. What do I want to suggest? What do I want to imply? I'm not going for photorealism in this drawing. I want an aspect of realism, but I also want to have these big shapes that come through, falling from the background through the outside of her portrait and then out the other side as well. If you have a look at the background and the shapes that I'm pulling, the actual like thickness of them and the way that they're moving through, I'm always trying to replicate it in certain areas of the portrait as well, so it complements each other. So if you look at some of the highlights in the hair, the shapes that I'm pulling out, they're all similar in like the width and the length, where I try to keep it relatively simple, which then helps bring your gaze into the more rendered area of the portrait, which is focused more on the features. Having this background that comes through this direction, coming out that way, pulls your attention into that focal point of her face as well. And then when we get into the real later stages of the drawing, it's about what areas I want to have more definition in. How do I want my edges to look? I start adding a little bit more variety in the background, just start pulling a couple more shapes out just to break it up a little bit more. There's two areas of this drawing that I really like. There's a simple implied shape within her hair that just falls, where I've just pulled that willow stick all the way down in that direction, and it just creates this real smooth implied form in the back of her hair. For me, that's so satisfying. There's just another shape that I've pulled coming through this area that just overlaps the edge of her hair. Those two areas for me make the drawing. And just because I'm a big fan of checkerboard lighting, I leave this area here really light, because we've got this dark area or a darker value of her hair coming through this way. So then that also complements the darker area on this side, which is in contrast to her hair. And then I leave this area as a light value as well, just so this area matches this area, and then this area matches this area. So everything works hand in hand within the portrait and the background. It's all working as one. I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.